Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. My name is Kristen, pronouns she, her, hers. I'm also going to do an image description, and my name is Chris, as I said, Kristen, and I'm a white woman with dark glasses, short curly hair. I'm wearing a black shirt with colored embroidery on it. And I am joined by Brooklyn Vetter and Julia Morris, who have been helping run the Restorative Justice series. This is actually our third event out of 4 we've been running since September, and we are just so ecstatic to have this group here with us today. We started off kind of, working at the principles of restorative justice, and today we have just a really exciting panel of guests with us who are really going to talk about it, extending it to our ministries, extending it to our lives, and how we can start applying it. And like I said, we've had some discussions already, and they've been so dynamic, and I just can't wait to hear the discussion from it. As I mentioned, we are going to be taping it. We ask that everybody stay muted during this time period. We will have plenty of time for questions. We've left a ton of time. So if you do have any questions, you can send them to the U.S. Federation account, which is our account right here. And I will be moderating the questions, and we have Arica from the Buchanan Institute initiative who will be talking and getting the questions out to everybody. I also wanted to give a special thanks to our sponsors who we would not be able to make this event happen: Avila University, the Association of Colleges of the Sisters of St. Joseph, Catholic Mobilizing Network, Mount St. Mary's University, Los Angeles, St. Catherine University, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Baden, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet of Los Angeles, the St. Joseph Worker Program. We're just so thankful for your support and all of the support of people who are participating here. It's really helped us to, one, upgrade the technology so we can offer this for you, but also to get such great speakers here with us today. Each of our panelists is going to do a presentation, and then we will move into questions after. And I will now introduce Brooklyn, who is going to go into our opening prayer, and she's going to explain a little bit about our image descriptions are new to us and new to our group, but we want to continue making sure these are accessible to all, and talk about, we're also using pronouns and introducing with those. So without further ado, Brooklyn.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm happy to be here. So yeah, like Kristen said, we are doing image descriptions as accessibility is an important part of restorative justice, and one that we are learning and growing in. So image descriptions, just as Kristen said, I am going to introduce myself with an image description. So I am Brooklyn. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman with brown hair that's pulled back into a side bun. I have big glasses that cover my whole eye. I'm wearing headphones, and I'm wearing a blue 3/4 length dress, and I have dangly earrings. Yes, so basically just providing an explanation of images to provide access of visual content for those who are blind, vision impaired, for our elders, as well as those who are calling in and having tech issues, so that they can have all the same information available that everyone else has. So that is something that we are working on providing. I will now, like Kristen said, start us out in prayer. And I'll read out, I have a slide that I'll read from, and I'll just read everything that's on the slide. It's a very basic slide, so it's just white with black letters that I'll be reading. So, and this is a prayer called The Living Litany of a People of St. Joseph. It was a collaboration by community members from the Sisters of St. Joseph for the Catholic Mobilizing Network, which is founded in the CSJ charism. So I'll begin. Open to the world, both miserable and sinful. And let us pause now to write a word, and you can write a word in the chat that names what is miserable and sinful in our world today. And I can't see the chat, so I'm sure you're sharing beautiful things. Next, a world worked on by the Holy Spirit. And now we'll pause and write a word in the chat that describes the action of the Holy Spirit in the world. You can share those in the chat with each other. Open and attentive to the sufferings of the world. Open, attentive, and spirit alert. Never settled down, always in a holy disquietude, searching, in order to understand, to divine what God and the dear neighbor await from them today, now, for the body and for the soul. And let us pause to write a word in the chat to describe a next step the Holy Spirit is asking of you today. What are we opening ourselves to today? Open, attentive, spirit alert, responding to the ministry needs of the time, without excluding the more humble, the less pleasing, the less noticeable. And let us pause to name someone in the chat who will be included in your heart that hasn't been there before. Who are you opening yourself to as we learn and dive deeper into restorative justice? Finally, in each one's face is the reflection of a virtue proper to our congregation. Continual joy of spirit. This is the quiet inner glow of the person whose life in service of the charism has been successful. Oops. Stop sharing. So that's our way to start opening, to start be attentive as we listen to these incredible panelists. And it's my pleasure to introduce Arica Maurer, who will be our facilitator this evening. Arica Maurer is the director of the Buchanan Initiative for Peace and Nonviolence at Avila University, where she also serves as adjunct faculty in peace studies. Prior to her transition to higher education, Arica worked for the U.S. Department of State, managing grants in conflict-prone areas such as Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Arica has also lived, studied, and conducted research in post-conflict Lebanon and Colombia. She earned her MA in International Peace and Conflict Resolution from American University's School of International Service in Washington, D.C., as well as a bachelor's degree in political science and international studies from the University of Kansas. And we're happy to have you start the conversation of your connection to restorative justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooklyn. For those of you who are unable to see me at the moment, I am a white woman. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I have long blonde hair and blue eyes. I'm wearing a magenta colored sweater, and I'm in my home office, and behind me you can see green walls, and and a world map. And as Brooklyn said, I am the director of the Buchanan Initiative for Peace and Nonviolence at Avila University. And Avila University has long been a proponent of restorative justice practices. And you can see that in our course offerings. We offer interdisciplinary courses to students of all majors, such as restorative relationships and restorative justice principles and practice. And we also bring restorative justice practitioners into our own classes, like mine, Peace Studies. And restorative justice is something that I was only introduced to a few years ago, and I'm continuing to learn and grow. And I'm hoping to find more ways that I can incorporate restorative justice practices into my work, but also within a university environment. And I'm also excited to announce that the courses that I mentioned earlier are now part of our very recently approved certificate program in peace and conflict resolution that we will begin offering next year. And for those of you who are outside of the Kansas City area, the peace and conflict resolution certificate can be obtained through exclusively online classes. So if you're interested, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. After that shameless plug, I just want to explain that my role this evening will be to introduce all of the wonderful panelists that we have here in the room with us, and also to take questions from you all and direct them as necessary. And as was mentioned earlier, please, if you think of questions, do send them to the congregation Zoom account via the Zoom chat feature, and we'll do our best to get your questions answered. So with that, I would like to turn your attention to our first panelist. His name is Dr. Sean Horrigan. Sean Horrigan, PhD, and his pronouns are he, him, and his, is the Director of University Centers and Staff Development at the University of San Diego. Previously, he served as the Director of Student Conduct and founded the Restorative Justice Program at USD, implementing restorative justice practices across various functional areas in student affairs. Sean has lectured in USD's School of Leadership and Education Sciences and is an adjunct faculty member in the College of Professional Studies at National University, teaching courses in leadership, group dynamics, and adult development. Currently, Sean teaches in USD's certificate program for restorative justice facilitation and leadership. He has a BA in education from the University of Northern Iowa and an MA and PhD in leadership studies from the University of San Diego. At USD's Center for Restorative Justice, he is on the leadership team of the Restorative Justice Network of Catholic Campuses, or RJNCC, and he is a restorative justice facilitator and trainer. Please help me welcome Sean.
Well, thank you, Arica. It's really great to be here. Thank you for allowing me a moment to share with you what I'm doing. I use the pronouns he, him, his, as Arica said. I am a white, cisgendered male with blonde hair, a beard. I'm wearing a blue shirt and glasses. And every once in a while, you might see a little head pop over my shoulder, and that's my 8-year-old son. There's 2 others who hopefully will give me 10 minutes of space. But it's really great to be here, and I think I want to begin my time just with an expression of gratitude. I want to thank each and every one of you for stepping into this work. And I want to acknowledge that there's a lot happening around us in the world that might inform our conversations in this space. We're in the midst of a health pandemic, an ongoing racial pandemic, and both of these may fall quite close for some of you. I think there are political and climatic disturbances that are also at work. And the fact that we're interacting virtually certainly takes its toll. All of these and more might be landing in different ways for each of us, and might impact how we show up together today. So again, gratitude for showing up. I want to begin by just talking a little bit about the work I do with the Center for Restorative Justice, a little bit about the center at the University of San Diego. It seeks to promote research teaching, training, and technical assistance for restorative justice projects in higher education, as well as K-12 communities, the criminal justice, and the criminal justice system. The center is housed at the Department of Leadership Studies and closely partners with the Student Affairs Office of Ethical Development and Restorative Practices, which is a former workplace of mine. The center, RJ Center, provides facilitator training on restorative practices, educational resources, presentations on coursework and coursework on best practices in restorative justice. We provide consultation and facilitation to institutions seeking a more restorative response to harmful incidents, provide networking groups and online learning communities, as well as conduct research on innovative practices and the evaluation of restorative programs. We have 5 main initiatives. The first is our PRISM project, where we address campus sexual misconduct in Title IX. We engage in, we have projects that specifically engage with medical colleges and health-related fields. We work in K-12 systems, and then we have our certificate in restorative justice, leadership, and facilitation. Finally, we have our restorative justice network of Catholic campuses, which Arica mentioned. And I want to spend some time briefly speaking to you about my work with the RJNCC. About 3.5 years ago, some colleagues and I, in a conversation, began recognizing the natural alignment between the philosophy of restorative justice and the guiding ideals of Catholic social tradition. The RJNCC encourages Catholic campuses to articulate and cultivate restorative principles and to assist each other in strengthening interest, commitment, and implementation of restorative practices on their campuses. We work to promote community building circles, practices in the classroom as pedagogy, residential life, athletics, and student organizations. We use restorative practices to address community concerns, improve campus climate, particularly around conflicts regarding race, religion, gender, and the red-blue political divide. Restorative responses to student misconduct, including binge drinking and academic dishonesty, bias incidents, sexual misconduct, and intimate partner violence. We provide restorative responses to faculty and staff misconduct and conflict that can create a hostile work environment. We promote civic engagement, including campus support, internships, and community engaged learning for community-based and prison-based RJ initiatives and in the K-12 schools. And ultimately, the purpose of higher education is to promote scholarship. So we work with scholarship on the theory and practice of RJ and the convergence of RJ philosophy and Catholic social thought. The RJNCC currently has interacted with about 400 individuals over the last 3.5 years. It includes 170 organizations and institutions and around 80 Catholic campuses. If you're aware that I think there are about 230 Catholic campuses in the United States, so we have a little work to do in order to engage more. And if you are not engaged in the Restorative Justice Network of Catholic campuses and you work in Catholic higher ed, we invite you to join us in this effort. There are 3 main areas, initiatives that we work in. First of all, we provide free and reduced cost training for Catholic universities. We sponsor Catholic higher education related conferences and gatherings focused on restorative justice. We share resources, provide scholarships for Catholic campus leaders to complete a full certificate in restorative justice. And this effort allows for us to make the University of San Diego a laboratory for the implementation of restorative justice across the campus. We have 3 main areas of campus implementation, and we use these 3 areas as a way to understand and articulate what a restorative campus might look like. The first area is institutional mission and advancement. RJ is certainly not unique to the Catholic faith. Indeed, expressions of restorative justice can be found in all major religions. However, RJ is closely aligned with the major principles of Catholic social teaching. It's a method in which Catholic higher education can express its values and identity. For example, we look at preferential option for the vulnerable, the dignity of all individuals, giving people participation in the processes that are going to impact them, and working towards a common good. We also focus on principles of subsidiarity and solidarity. An example of this in action came to me a few weeks ago in a conversation with a Catholic institution in the Midwest that we were providing a training for that was attended by a number of alumni officers. These are individuals on campus that engage alumni in their affinity and giving back both in their work and their treasure to the campus. This campus became to realize that they had disenfranchised a number of BIPOC alums, and were using restorative justice to re-engage those alums around how to address the impact and harm that they experience as students. The second area we promote restorative justice in on campus is the area of student affairs. We promote community building. We look at orientation and processes for bringing students together. We address student conflict and responding to community harm. And we look at how do we reintegrate members of our community back into campus. This might be in the context of suspension, when students study abroad, go on immersion trips. And currently on my mind is how do we bring students back to campus following the COVID-19 pandemic? How do we welcome them back, bring their wisdom that they have gained during this time of separation, and make ourselves better as a result of that experience? The third area we apply restorative justice is in academic affairs. Certainly research and is a primary emphasis. The growth of research in restorative justice has been significant in the last 20 years. What started as a few articles is now close to 200, 250 articles a year that are peer-reviewed and scholarly in their nature. We look at pedagogy in the classroom and engage faculty how to use restorative practices in order to promote understanding of their subject area, and the use of restorative justice in service learning and community engagement initiatives. Just to conclude my time here, I'd like to begin how I ended, which is offering gratitude. So let me just offer a few notes of gratitude that I think will also express how I seek to live restoratively. So I want to provide gratitude that my work in restorative justice and Catholic higher education are so intertwined. I want to provide gratitude for our mission that calls upon us to promote dialogue in the midst of tension and ambiguity while valuing the dignity of all human beings. Gratitude for the courage of my colleagues that are willing to lean into the hard conversations and the messiness of campus conflict. Gratitude for those who use RJ to create opportunities for students to experience, reflect upon, and I have gratitude for campuses. I have gratitude for campuses that receive students and allow themselves to be transformed in the process because of their presence. I'm grateful to those who use RJ to dig into the root causes of injustices, both on our campuses and around the world. And I have gratitude for all those who ask and wrestle with the big questions presented by the college experience. Finally, and if that list wasn't long enough, I have gratitude for all those who expose young people to the world of restorative justice in hopes that they will grow up to engage in that world more restoratively, to not only live more restoratively, but to lead more restoratively so that we might heal in the ways that we need to. Thank you for inviting me here and allowing me to share a little bit about my work. And I'm excited to be in the company of such amazing people and see what questions you have.
Thank you so much, Sean. I share your feelings of gratitude, certainly. I would now like to introduce Jessica Cuevas, our next panelist. Jessica Cuevas uses the pronouns she, her, and hers, and is a first-generation college student and 3-time alumna from Mount St. Mary's University in Los Angeles. As a student, Jessica served as a resident assistant and head resident assistant in her last 2 years at the Mount. In 2001, she earned a bachelor's degree in business administration with an emphasis in accounting and a minor in Spanish, and went on to work for one of the big 6 accounting firms. Jessica's joy for working with students and empowering them in their educational journey led her to return to Mount St. Mary's University as Assistant Director of Residence. Jessica also earned a master's degree in counseling psychology and a master's degree in business administration from the Mount. In 2016, after 13 years in residence life, Jessica went from Director of Residence Life to becoming the second Dean of Student Life at MSMU. Jessica has received training and certifications in Title IX, Restorative Justice, Mental Health First Aid, Trauma-Informed Care, and Motivational Interviewing. She is passionate about our Catholic identity and aligning these values to the programs, services, and environment within the Division of Student Affairs. Help me welcome Jessica Cuevas.
Thank you. As you said, my name is Jessica Cuevas. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a Hispanic woman with long, dark brown hair and brown eyes, wearing a short sleeve gray shirt with the Mount St. Mary's University white logo on it. And thank you everyone for this opportunity. I think this is a great segue for me to follow Sean, because he was part of the team where I was trained as an RJ facilitator a few years ago. And it's been a wonderful experience to be introduced to RJ and practices. Also because the work that we are doing in with restorative justice is in the Division of Student Affairs. That's where we're getting started. So I want to talk a little bit about, when I was younger, I was in youth ministry, and restorative justice is the big part of that, but I didn't know it. And I've always been passionate about serving others, but more than that, fostering healing, transforming relationships, working with youth then when I was, a teenager, accepting our differences and seeing our life as a vocation, that all of us with our different talents and experiences are called to serve a purpose in life. And I think that is the main reason why I returned to Mount St. Mary's, because of my experience as a student. I was taught and brought up with our founders, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carmelite, in making a difference, looking to love others without distinction, and for us to get the tools that each person needs to have opportunities. And I really wanted that in my life. I felt like I needed that in my life to be able to feel like I was doing what I've been put in this earth to do. And so that's why I haven't left. I've been there for 16 years, and it's wonderful work. And now to transition in my ministry as a Dean of Student Life is when I was more formally introduced to restorative justice and restorative justice practices. My co-dean, Dr. Laura Crow, is the one that was doing research in it. She started talking to me about it. I noticed like a sparkle in my eye, and like I would get really excited about it. And I said, okay, this is the next focus. This is the next thing that we need to do. And so what we saw was a natural alignment with the mission of our Sisters of St. Joseph, the mission of Mount St. Mary's, our Catholic tradition core values, and restorative justice principles. And so, we said at its core, it's who we are. And so it's really easy to commit to getting the work started. I mean, the work is not easy, but it was like, yes, we want to do this. Let's see how we can do it. And like I said, we were motivated by our founders, them doing this work since day one, why our university was founded, and we really wanted to continue in their footsteps to utilize it in our interactions with our students and the work that we did. And so we started by learning more about it, articles, reading David Karp's Little Book of Restorative Justice for colleges and universities, and then got to getting certified. And learning about RJ is very different than getting certified, because it's like you live it, so you understand it better. And it was really transformational for me. And I wanted to make sure to continue to learn so that I can then help with that work with others. So then what we did after learning more about it is we brainstormed, what are we currently doing at Mount St. Mary's in our roles as Dean of Student Life that we could kind of adjust to incorporate restorative justice and restorative practices. And we made a plan, what we wanted to do year 1, year 2, year 3. We were more ambitious than how we actually got the work done, because it takes a lot and resources, but we're still at it. And so we thought of our, what we do a lot is meet with students. We meet with students about various things, care, conduct, different things. And so we wanted to make sure that our focus was restorative, and our communication in writing and our conversations with students. We had restorative language. We made sure that our questions were restorative. We promoted listening, open dialogue, effective statements, things that we are not making assumptions about why they're with us and about what they're sharing. We really wanted to see them as they are. Then we looked further at our traditional student conduct process. We want to say that we have a hybrid, but we don't yet. It's still traditional, but we started incorporating more things like language and how when we meet with students, how we come to that meeting. And also training our conduct officers so that they also use restorative language, questions, listening, and all of that. We also took a look at our sanctions and wanted to make sure we had restorative outcomes, and that it was not just a punitive focus, but a focus on learning, growth, healing, restoring the belonging, which we, in our experience, a lot of the students after going through the conduct process feel marginalized, not belonging, and also helping identifying the harm. And hopefully they won't return to this process because they are transformed. We're all transformed together as we learn. So those are the kind of the areas that we identified where we're gonna start. Then we, as scary as it was for us, or at least for me, I'll speak for myself, we said we need to kind of start presenting and training on this at our own institution and talk to other groups where it feels right, and they could also take easy steps to start getting this work done. And so we started talking to and presenting to residents live, to the professional staff, to the resident assistants, and how they could do this work with their residents, and at their floor meetings, how they can incorporate circles. We did role play. Then we also had the opportunity to present with our student leaders at one of our annual student leadership summits. And we decided we want to talk to them about restorative leadership. Leading with Awareness was the title of our presentation. And we really wanted to help each other have these conversations with restorative in mind, and building trust and being aware and mindful. And so something else that we started also dipping our toes in is trying to incorporate this as community building at our orientation programs as well, and continue to learn, to do workshops and trainings. This summer there was a few online which were great. There was one online about the art of crafting community building, which is great because we all get zoomed out or tired, Zoom fatigue, and we really need to find ways to have that connection and build that trust and build a community building. And so that was great. Then there was another one on the restorative justice in the residence halls. And so I think that the continual learning in the different spaces we occupy right now, and then also finding other things like trauma-informed care, learning more about that, and learning about where our students are, how they're coming, and really trying to ensure that we provide safe space for them physically, emotionally, not re-traumatize them, and really help empower them and see them as who they are and what they bring, and motivational interviewing as well. Different things that align to have dignity, acceptance, and just continue this great work of, growth and restoring. And so that's what we've been doing at Mount St. Mary's, and that is what I'm really passionate about, and I'm so glad that there was an opportunity for me and for our team to do this work at Mount St. Mary's.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So we'll now take it out of the academic setting and look to some practitioners in the field outside of higher education. I'd like to introduce our next panelist, Heather Thompson. Heather Thompson, who uses the pronouns she, her, and hers, has been a legal assistant with the Public Defender's Office since 2017 and currently volunteers as a restorative justice facilitator with the DC Peace Team. Prior to that, Heather worked with a nonprofit organization that focused on bail reform. From 2007 to 2015, she was a courtroom clerk at the Montgomery County Circuit Court in Rockville, Maryland. She is a recent graduate of Montgomery College, where she earned 2 associate degrees. Heather has participated in victim offender dialogues in the past and is a passionate advocate for criminal and social justice reform. Please help me welcome Heather.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me tonight and to your community. I'm very honored to be here. So a little bit about me. My name is Heather, and I use the pronouns she, her, hers. I am an African-American woman with chin-length curly hair, and tonight I am wearing a long-sleeve pink shirt with a burgundy pattern that kind of looks like snowflakes. So yeah, that's me. So I came into restorative justice unknowingly about 25 years ago. My brother David was murdered, and I was really close to him. He was my big brother. He was my idol, and I looked up to him. So his death hit me really hard, and his death was the result of a hate crime. So I was very angry. I was a 19-year-old kid, and I was very angry at the world. I was very angry at the offender. And it took me a very long time to come to terms with his death. And I really struggled to find closure. So about 1.5 years ago, I reached out to the Department of Corrections in my state, and I asked if I could participate in a victim offender dialogue. I had heard about it, and I knew just, things here and there, what I had seen on TV, but I didn't really know a lot. But at the same time, I knew it was something I needed to do to find that closure and find a sense of forgiveness. So I had an amazing facilitator, and she walked me through a 6-month process of a lot of questions. We went back and forth between me and her and the facility, her and the offender, the facility where he was housed, the warden, the case manager. It was a very long process. And like I said, about 6 months later, we finally met. And it was the most humbling experience ever. The gentleman was 18 when he committed the offense. I was 19. My brother was 27. So in some ways, I could relate to him as far as our age and what path he could have gone down, given the path that I had gone down. So we kind of had the age thing in common. And we went through some paperwork before we started the dialogue. And when he walked into the room, the first thing I did was hug him. And I told him I forgave him. And I don't know what came over me in that moment, but it felt right. And it felt like it was the right thing to do. And I apologized to him for the incredibly horrible and mean, hateful things that I said to him during the trial, during sentencing, and every other hearing. I was definitely not a nice person, and he deserved an apology. So I offered that to him, and he accepted. We spent about 90 minutes talking and getting to know each other. And again, it was humbling. It was empowering. And at the end of it, I was able to gain that closure that I needed. And I realized it wasn't about forgiving him. It was about you know, me forgiving me for being so angry and having those feelings, because things happen and one mistake in life does not define you. And I learned that from spending that time with him. So we left. Again, we ended it with a hug, and I promised to come back a few months later, which I did. And unfortunately, the second visit did not go as well, but I was totally prepared for that, and I was okay with it. And, you know, maybe in a few more months, I'll go back and kind of revisit it and see if we can go back to that first visit feeling, but if not, it's okay. And because of that, my coworker introduced me to the DC Peace team. And a couple months after my dialogue, I went to my first training, which was an intro, and it was amazing. And I was like, how do I, you know, do more? What can I do? So a few months after that, I went to an advanced training. And again, I loved it. It was great. And then I got invited to be a facilitator. So I have been a facilitator since April, and it has been the most rewarding experience ever. The DC Peace team has this vision of finding peace and justice in the world. And they take people like me, who may have been a little bit on the angry side and frustrated with the world, and they turn us into these amazing nonviolent communicators. And I use those skills to help facilitate RJ circles. The DC Peace team also, works with protests and rallies, and, you know, helping deploy people who try to keep the peace, especially in moments that could present violence. And so it's one of the most beautiful gifts that I have ever been given. That introduction to the DC Peace team is priceless. What they do to help others and help the community, it is magnificent. And I wish that, you know, we could really live our lives like that every day and everything that we do, and share it with others so that they can experience what peace looks like. So yeah, that's me. I definitely invite all of you to join some of our trainings, get to know us and be part of our team and see what we do. It would be an honor to see all of you there. So thank you for allowing me to share my story.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was incredibly moving, and I really appreciate you sharing your story with everyone. Our next panelist is Emil De Weaver, and I'll share with you a little bit about Emile. Emile's pronouns are he, him, and his, and he became a published writer, community organizer, and co-founder of PrisonerRenaissance.org while serving a 67-year to life sentence. Former California Governor Jerry Brown granted him clemency in 2017. Emile is interested in internalized systems of oppression and how they prevent us from building and maintaining effective models of justice. He guest lectures at social justice venues and in universities about his written work, what he calls liberation models, and what he calls the lying fiction of criminality. His written works comprise over 50 published articles, essays, short stories, poems, plays, and curricula. His community organizing includes education and communication campaigns to pass 4 Senate bills and Proposition 57. His organization is the first nonprofit founded and run by incarcerated people. Their aim is to take prison administration out of prison programs as a step toward prison abolition. Thank you so much, Emile, for joining us, and I'll turn the floor over to you. Help me welcome Emile.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name's Emil De Weaver. I am a Black man with short brown hair, and I have the sides of my face are shaven, though a little scruffy. And I have a mustache and just a beard that's on my chin that's connected. I'm wearing glasses, which is hard to see my eyes because the reflective screen is really there. And I'm wearing dark black headphones with very cushy cushions for my ears above a gray sweatshirt hoodie. I'm in my room, which also has a green wall, and it's clutter on one side and my bedside table on the other. I'm gonna start this timer because I tend to rant, and so I need something to keep me on track. So I first encountered restorative justice while serving a life sentence in prison. And I went to restorative justice workshops and symposiums. I was a part of a restorative justice group. I have participated in dialogues between survivors of crime and people who have committed harm in their communities. I have engaged in restorative justice practices for a long time of what we call giving back, and also creating programs that create doorways for other people to reinvest in the communities that either they harmed or that they feel alienated from. And today I am working at a tech company, and because the world is as crazy as it is right now, I've kind of come to the point where it's like, it may be time to leave tech and like get more focused in like the passions and the things that are important in this life, like social justice and restorative justice. So I'm currently figuring out how to transition out of that space into a space where it feels like I belong more squarely, given the challenges we're dealing with. My experiences with restorative justice, at least my passion as like restorative justice exists, is in dealing with the challenge of the culture in which restorative justice is arising. And that's a very punitive white supremacist culture. And one of the results of that, one of the pitfalls of that, is even in this really very important and beautiful practice, we find that, at least I have found that, like, you know, restorative justice practitioners are currently becoming aware of this fact, and they're trying to do better and trying to get away from like narratives about offenders and victims, and trying to get away from punitive thinking and language. I want to talk a little bit today about how we're doing that and why that might be difficult. One of the reasons I think it is because like we have a status quo that's like very different than what we're talking about with restorative justice. And the natural tendency then is to be like, well, we have to make small steps so that we can gradually get people across this Grand Canyon of conceptual, this conceptual challenge. And I think the danger of that is we can see that as such a job that we can become satisfied with anything, and we can perhaps lose sight of restorative justice as a transitioning path to a more just society, and see it as an end in itself. And I am in the work to try to make sure that that doesn't happen. I think that the good news is the very real fear that tendency is like built in, is like, we have to go slow, we can't be too radical, we have to take these, we have to prepare people. I think that we're wrong about that. And I think that Alexandria Cortez said that, like, you know, justice already exists, you know, a world free of like state violence and police oppression already exists. We call it the suburbs. And I think that she's making like a really good point there, but I think that she's also she's making something available to us, and that is this thing that we think is like so radical is something that we already have and we practice like daily sometimes. We just don't practice it for certain people. And so I want to share with you like a very recent story that like illustrates this, and it speaks to this idea of why I feel like crime is not actually a real thing. It's a lying fiction. And what a lying fiction is like, if you think about what a literary fiction is, it is a lie that reveals the truth. So it's like not a real story, but it still tells us something about the human condition. It tells us something about the world we live in. And I think what a lying fiction then is like is kind of the inverse. It is a fact, it is true, right? But this fact or this truth actually obscures a larger truth or obscures the most relevant truth. I think an example of that would be a spouse who is cheating on their partner with someone at work. And this person comes home and their partner feels very hurt and they accuse their spouse of cheating. And the spouse reaction is to get very angry and shout that, I've been at work all day. Like, you are insecure and like marriages need trust to work. So the spouse has said three things that are fact, they're factual. He has been at work all day. The person is insecure, just for very good reason. And marriages are hard. It's hard for a marriage to succeed without trust. All these things are factual. And none of them matter. They're like beside the point. You're cheating on your spouse. That's like the relevant point. So that's how I try to contextualize what a lying fiction is. And so to give an example of like how we are already in the place where we practice restorative justice and we practice transformative justice if we choose to. I want to share a story, like something that happened to me maybe 3 weeks ago. And let me check my time. Okay, maybe 3 weeks ago. I would try to rush through this. I was at a coffee and I haven't been going shopping, and I put it off to the last minute, and I said, you know what, I'm just not gonna make it to Trader Joe's. I'm gonna walk to Walgreens and I'm just gonna buy whatever coffee they have. Otherwise, what am I gonna do with my life? So I walk to the store, I have a mess, and I'm standing in line with this coffee, and there's this young Black man, he's a security guard, and I see that he's getting really excited, really gun-ho, right? And he's like conferring with the store clerks, and he's like really excited, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, okay, someone's stealing something. And I was a security guard when I was 18. So I know what it is to be a Black kid working security in a white-owned store or a white store, and be under the social pressure that the employees never have to exert. It simply exists that I need to prove myself. I got to show you that like I'm one of the good Black people. And so I see him enacting that, which I don't like, but I understand. But the other thing is I'm having this trauma response deep in my body. So I'm recalling all the times when I was a kid that I was caught shoplifting. And my heart is racing. And I am looking at the mirrors in the store and I am thinking to myself, please don't let this be some kid. And I finally catch sight of the person that like now the security guard is making a beeline to. And it's like this older man, probably without a home, probably a drug user, in a hoodie. And I'm slightly relieved that it's not a child, but I'm also still feeling like this like, I have to do something. And at first I was thinking, let me get out of line and go find this person and be like, hey man, they're like, the gig is up, they're on you, man, stop doing what you're doing. But so intuitively, I was like, that's not it. And so I'm racking my brain in line. And it finally comes to me. So I give the clerk my coffee and I'm saying, hey, I want to get this. I'll be right back. So I go to the pair, the security guard and the guy, he's like walking out to like perhaps arrest, perhaps call the police. I don't know what his plan was. I know that when I was a security guard, like, you know, you call the police. And I stepped to the person who 5 seconds before the whole store considered a criminal, displayed some dim amount of fear of, and I say to him, hey man, go back in the store, get whatever you need and I'll pay for it. And the security guard who 5 minutes, like, you know, a couple minutes before was like, it looked like the only thing he wanted to do was bust this guy and like hold him accountable. He immediately fell back, a look of deep relief on his face. What happened next? The entire store began to transform. There's 2 checkers, perhaps because of COVID, and like a third one that was like standing empty and like a long line through the store. The woman working the photo shop leaves the photo shop to open a 3rd checker to start running the line quicker so that this man can get what he needs and go home. The air of disdain and fear has turned into one of treating this man like the human being that he is. And it is unfortunate that I had to buy it, that we had to pay for it, but like, let's start somewhere. It was there. And so we got this man where he needed to go, and he left. And in that moment, he went from being a person committing a crime to a person being supported by his community. And it cost $30, and it costs $80,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. And the people in that store, once given the opportunity to be a community, seized it like it was like the last drink of water in their life. I didn't have any conversations with them. I didn't know. They just saw an opportunity to rise and be a community, and they did it. And so, and that is the difference between a crime and community. That is the only difference between a crime and community. And so I want restorative justice to be very clear about that. And also I want practitioners of restorative justice to know we are not far away from it. We're not, it's like not on the moon. It's here, right? It's here and we do it. And the thing that I really, really value about restorative justice is at least at least like sometimes it's explicitly acknowledged, sometimes it's not explicitly acknowledged, but it is the understanding that crime is not as we like to, and not as we're taught to think about it, like the act that the criminal does. Crime is a choice a community makes about how they respond to harm. Just like in that store, there was a choice that was made in that store by everyone in the store, because the entire process is derailed. If any player, the security guard, the checkers, they'd be like, no, call the police. This dude is stealing something. But it was a decision that everybody made in that store that turned a crime into a community action. And that's what we have available in restorative justice. That's what we have available in a bridge from restorative justice to transformative justice. And that's what I want to share with you. Restorative justice isn't something we need to convince the world of. It is not on the moon. It is right here. It is right here, and we are ready for it, whether we know it or not. We just need to be given the opportunity to experience and access and practice it and be trained on it. So that's my experience with restorative justice. Thank you for your time, and thank you for having me.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much, Emile, for sharing that with us. And I just wish we all had more time. There are some wonderful questions coming in from you all. And so I hope we can get to them all. But one question that I want to start with, and this really, I think resonated with me, especially when you were talking, Heather, about maybe, you know, your second encounter with the perpetrator of your family's crime, of when things can maybe not go so well. And so the question that I would like to pose to all of you is, are there any instances where restorative justice practices can go wrong? And what are those? And how can we avoid those?
So I will say that with my experience, how the second one went wrong, how to fix it or how to reclaim it, I guess, would be to make another attempt and see what could happen. Not everyone would be willing to do that or give it a try. And just because I would be willing to do it doesn't mean that he would be willing to do it. But it's worth giving it a try. And in turn, you never know what might happen, because, you know, if you don't do something, you don't know what the outcome's going to be. So even though I had that negative experience the second time, my first experience was so powerful that I'd be willing to give it a third try. Thank you.
I want to say that, for instance, in higher education, like with our students, we do give them the opportunity to do, to talk to the person that caused them harm and to try to talk about it and see where, you know, what space they were each in. But I think part of what Emile is saying, we need to do more awareness and training and what restorative justice is about, and about the healing and transformation, because it's not that they're not ready. I think that they want it and they hunger for it, but if they don't feel like safe, we have to talk more about it, so that when they're ready, they can have hopefully a transformative experience on the side of all those participating. And so there is definitely work to be done, because we've offered on various occasions and students want nothing to do with the other individual or individuals, but that just, I think, motivates us more to do more awareness, education, and why this is important. And but it's important not to force these conversations and encounters with our with people.
So my thoughts, so I sometimes say that restorative justice has a great power to heal, but it also has the power to destroy if practiced poorly. In higher education, well, actually, a couple of the ways in which I think it can lend towards destruction. So Heather brought up for me the importance of preparation. 6 months preparing the ground to make that first conversation that was so powerful. In higher education, we might not spend 6 months, but we'll spend multiple opportunities to meet with a student offender or the harm party, getting them to a place where they can feel safe and that the process will work, and confidence in the facilitator. I see processes go wrong when they're not trauma informed. I see processes go wrong when they stop short of addressing the root causes of the injustices, and we just deal with the interpersonal conflict. If we don't deal with the historical and root causes of harm, then we're not really doing our best work. And things might seem really nice between two people and get better, but we've stopped short of the power and possibility of restorative justice.
Yeah, I think to build on what Sean just said about like losing sight of the historical context and not addressing that and being accountable for that. I think one thing that like I've seen go wrong with restorative justice is restorative justice in prisons, in a prison setting. So, you know, the formula for having a restorative justice program in prison is to get the prison's approval to do it. So that makes prison administrators the gatekeepers of what kind of program gets to be in a prison, who gets to come in and staff that program, which means that whether they are explicit or implicit, there are narratives that these programs must uphold. And many of these narratives double down on the legitimacy of the state like prison institution. And so when we talk about being accountable for the historical context, we have a social accountability that is often absent in the accounting process. And for the most part, most of the accountability is heaped onto the person who has caused the harm, because they are the visible manifestation of all of the dysfunction that has led to their act. And the result then is a like a pathologizing of the individual. And I think that where that could go right is society and the state like taking, being more intentional about its responsibility. Because the conditions that, like, you know, I've been in prison almost all of my life. Most of the people that are in prison are Black people and people of color. And so the conditions that led these people to prison were created. They were not happenstance. Not only were they were more than created. You know, communities of color have been trying to build foundation in this country for a long time. They were systemically attacked. Some of the most egregious examples are like the Oklahoma City bombing, the wholesale manufacturing of the war on drugs that started explicitly with Nixon, admitted to by his own aides, that we made up the war on drugs to police and attack communities of color and protesters of the war. And of course we knew it wasn't true. So like these things were like created. And so in a process of accountability, like the state needs to take accountability, and we need to hold the state accountable. And that is not to excuse like the bad act, that is not to excuse the harmful acts of the individual suffering because those harms were committed against them. But when we heap all of the accountability for reparation on the individual, we have like created this gaslighting that isn't actually conducive to that person's healing. They're not able to heal. And so I just feel like that's one of the things that goes wrong with restorative justice.
Thank you so much for that. And there's another question that came in that I think is related to this question of accountability and reckoning with history, but not necessarily with the state. The question is, many Catholic colleges have enslaved persons in their histories. What specific restorative practices are being or can be implemented to address this slaveholder issue? How do we stop investing in racist corporations? One what insight do you all have perhaps for dealing with these histories that are shameful, particularly for Catholic colleges and universities?
Well, maybe I could just take a quick swing at that. This is not an area of expertise of mine, and not many Catholic campuses have really done a full reconciling with that history. And frankly, we're not just talking about the history of slavery, but we're talking about the visible symbols of that history that are on some of our campuses. I'll share two quick incidents that are worth exploring if you're interested. The first is Georgetown University and the work that they did that's been fairly well documented and publicized. So you could certainly look that up. But that was a result of a number of conversations and research around its history and identifying the descendants of those slaves that were sold. And then taking accountability for that in terms of transparency, and then the restitution to the descendants in terms of opportunities to attend the university. At the University of San Diego recently, it was a large discussion around the naming of buildings. On our campus in the past, we've had the naming of a building after Saint Juniper Serra, who has a controversial past and history. And that was an important conversation for our campus community that ultimately, and I won't go into the complex history, but just it is a complex history. The decision and restorative agreement that was created was to retain the name, but to rename the building Saints Hall, that would both acknowledge the contributions of Father Serra, but also include in that Saint Caterina Tekakwitha, who was the first Native American or indigenous saint named by the Catholic Church. But it's just an example, like the ongoing importance of dialogue and conversations, leaning into the messiness of those. And I think that requires leadership to know that the campus will not fall apart if we have these hard conversations. That communities want to have these, they're craving those conversations. I am always impressed by the prophetic nature of the young people who are on our campuses. They are way ahead of us on these topics. And if we stop to listen, if we act upon what they're asking for, we will make our campuses better, and our students will be better for it. They will, it will enrich their educational experience. And, you know, I think we'll live into our missions a lot more as a result.
Thank you, Sean. Did anyone else want to take a stab at that question? It's a tough one. Well, again, thank you, Sean. Another question that has come in is, what are resources for individuals or organizations who have caused harm? Where do we go for support?
I don't think we live yet in a we're not geared in a society with institutions geared to facilitate accountability of power. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about, like, my institution, how do we rectify harm we've done? Like, to say that is to speak from a position of power. And so power is not accountable in this country, thus we don't have institutions to address what you're trying to do. I think that if I could offer a reframing, the job is building the institutions to do this. And that's not a simple answer. I know that, like, you know, I always want an answer, like, man, what's my magic bullet? How do I do this thing and get it done? Like, it's me, and I feel like it's so unfair that there are no pat answers in life for me, right? But it's the case. But I think the job is we have to build the institution and we have to do it a step at a time. I think that restorative justice is collectively the best in us, the best in, however, like, you know, whatever your life view is, the best in humankind trying to take a first step. Because it is certainly not the answer, but we do all intuitively feel it is in the right direction. And so that is the unsatisfying answer to your question, is we have to build those institutions. And we have to do the work, and we have to like look around, and we have to figure out what we can do. The simple answer is, oh, well, like give to organizations that are doing the work and are helping, but that's not actually the answer. The answer is like, we all got to get involved, and we all have to do, like, think about what our strengths are, and we all got to apply them. And most of all, we all have to be uncomfortable. And one of the uncomfortable things that is going to give us the skills, because we don't know that we don't have a great skill at being uncomfortable, right? And so we have to develop that. And that's going to open up more possibilities for us. I often say, like, you know, we don't really actually have, like, I am a big anti-colonialist, like white supremacist. Not that anyone here is not anti-white supremacist, but like, I'm big on it. But I also say, like, you know, if I'm honest, I don't know that I yet have the imagination to imagine a world that's not colonial, right? And I don't think that we have the imagination yet to hit the mark that we're trying to hit when we ask these kind of questions, because, you know, colonialism has been the only model of power we have ever seen. And so we're now in the business of trying to create something that we have never seen, right? And that means that we're going to be uncomfortable. We're going to have to take it a step at a time. We're going to have to pay very close attention to the processes we use to make those steps, and make sure that those processes embody the right principles and do not undermine our efforts. Because right now, like, we do things and we often find that our efforts are undermined. Like, we work for a nonprofit, and we're like, I got into this nonprofit to do this great work. Why do I feel like shit? Why do I feel like a part of the problem? And that is because that's the imagination problem, and that's because we're not paying very close attention to our processes, which means that we're not operating from very sound principles. And I think that that is something that a church can offer. Is at its best, there are some ideals and some very sound principles that can lead to, like, you know, as the parable goes, like, you know, a fruit by its tree, or you know a tree by its fruit, right? The tree is the principle, the fruit is the result, right? And so if you can locate sound principles and make sure your processes do not compromise on them, you can figure out how to produce sound fruit. That sound fruit introduces into this world the experiences we need to imagine the world we're trying to locate when we ask a question like this. That was a long answer, I'm sorry.
No, thank you so much for that reframing. I know that I so appreciate it, but so do all of us in the audience. One last question before we wrap things up. I would like to give each of you the opportunity to share how restorative justice in your professional life has been helpful for you as an individual outside of work. Are there ways that you recommend incorporating restorative practices into our daily lives with our families and our friends, especially now that many of us are spending all day, every day, locked indoors with our family members?
And especially as we get ready to sit around the Thanksgiving table, and some of those difficult conversations as a result of what's happening in the world and our country right now. Where do I apply this outside? Well, I think you're right, family. As a parent, I try to engage restoratively with my children. I let them tell stories. I let them participate in what appropriate decisions, age-appropriate decisions within our family. They're by no means angels, but we try to calm and we have empathy, like for them. I think in terms of my community and my neighbors, I try to seek to understand, to build relationships, to see the truth in different experiences, whether it's working on my HOA or it's engaging in some of the recent political conversations where I have one yard sign in my yard and someone else has another yard sign for a different candidate. Or in the COVID-19 era when, there are differences in perceptions of things like masks and distance and so forth. So I just think, living restoratively invites us to just center relationships in our work, to bring empathy into and compassion. And I think, for those who identify as Catholic, that can come naturally as a result of our faith. And but just to bring that into the world and lead from that place as well, if we're on teams and groups. I think about the work I do with my staff and whatever committees we happen to have. It's like I try to create an opening in those meetings, check in, see how people are doing, build relationships so that when the work gets hard, those relationships are there to ground us. I'll leave it there.
So for me, I use it in my community. I'm a basketball and soccer coach with my community. So I use it to ease a lot of fears with parents with everything going on right now. At work, I use it with my coworkers, specifically those who, have different viewpoints and trying to find that middle ground in a peaceful way. But most important to me, I use it with my kids. They're 21 and 23, and their friends come over and we have these informal kind of restorative circles, just talking about what's going on in the community. And as the parent of two Black sons, I worry. And, their friends, they're Black and brown. And so I worry every time they walk out the door. So to have those uncomfortable conversations, I think has given them the tools that they need to be successful, or as close to being successful on the outside when they may encounter something that they're not used to or that they shouldn't have to encounter. So it's a very useful tool that you can use totally, unknowingly to the participants. When my kids' friends leave, they're like, wow, your mom's cool. She likes to talk. And they have no idea what I just did. So I love that part of it. Thank you.
I think for me, it's similar to what Sean started with my kids. I have 3 daughters. They're on the younger side, but my oldest is starting to have more awareness of things that are happening, of things that others tell her. And so being really open about having conversations and her feeling safe about sharing what she hears or how she interprets things, and really letting her, trying not to tell her you should think this way, but tell me what you're thinking and then kind of go from there. In my community, I think it's more with family, because I think it's easiest sometimes with family to not have this understanding or space of we may think differently or have different experiences, but we still need to be restorative and understanding, and not want to push things on each other. And in my community, I think right now it's mostly at Mount St. Mary's with our students, and finding any opportunity that we can to provide the space for uncomfortable conversations. We are more used to just being friendly and nice, but that's not what we need to do. We need to really share so that we know how we're feeling, so that we can move forward with healing. And so just even the smallest steps, I try to find ways to incorporate it, because I know that it's something that, is important, and I want to continue doing for the rest of my, my life.
Awesome. Emile, I don't know if you had anything to share before I turn things over to Julia.
Not that it hasn't already been shared. I noticed like a common theme with us all is we all think about restorative justice when it comes to our children. That's a very natural place for it to start, and I would imagine that if it can't work there, like it's not gonna work anywhere. But I often say, like, I often have conversations with people about abolition, and people are like, it's understandably difficult to imagine. What do you mean, like a world where we don't need prisons and we have other institutions and we don't have prisons for like bad people? And often the conversation comes around to, do you know what a world of abolition looks like? It's a world where you treat people like they're your children. If your child got in trouble, you would do everything in your power to help and save them and see them safe, and see the system and see the situation rectified, see the people they harmed restored. You would do everything in your power. And that's all abolition is the idea of, as the acknowledgement that everyone is someone's child. And so bring the same love and care that you bring to your children to the rest of the world. And that's all abolition is. And from, I'm not a deeply religious person, but from what I know about the ideals of Catholicism and the practice of Catholicism at its highest state, it is that statement that Jesus made about like treat people, love people like I love these children because they are my children. And that's all abolition is. And that's how you can practice it in your daily life. And you will practice it so imperfectly because you're a person. But like just keeping that as your compass and like coming back to that, and not attacking yourself when you don't do it, but being open and being humble to return to it when you notice that you're not doing it.
Well, thank you for giving those of us like myself that are new at practicing restorative justice permission to not always do it perfectly, and to just keep trying and keep coming back to the table. Well, with that, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Julia, who will give us some wrap-up comments.
Thank you so much. I'm Julia. I'm the Justice Outreach Coordinator for the Federation. I'm a white woman with red hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a black turtleneck. So for our next session, we will be focusing on applying restorative justice to our interior lives and ministries. So really focusing on our commitment to doing the internal work and kind of practicing it in our everyday lives and trying to become better and better there, so that we can also become better and better, on the outside as well, and with other folks and, different settings too. So please come back and follow up with us for that next session. We'll post about it on our social media accounts and on our website. And then I just wanted to say thank you to all of our sponsors, attendees, our sisters, agrégés, associates, students, St. Joseph workers, ACSSJs, and partners in missions. Of course, also to our wonderful speakers and moderator. I've learned so much tonight. I don't know about everybody else, but I feel like I'm really ready to go out there and give this another go and really try to learn more about restorative justice. Also, please feel free and contribute to our Restorative Justice Guidebook and open dialogue on our RJ Charism. Our resources are on our website, and they include all of our panelists' work and the organizations on there, the DC Peace Team trainings, Emile's work, and etc. The website is, cssjfed.org/restorative justice resources. And then I'll hand it off to Brooklyn for our closing prayer.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And I wonder if I think I need to just take a breath to let everything in that was said. Yeah, I'm just so grateful for the wisdom and the wisdom that you all brought. And I'm just going to end with a closing reflection, and I'll share my screen again. So, and I'm just going to read the words that are on the screen. And this is a reference from a reflection from the Right Reverend Stephen Charleston at Choctaw. Still now, our nervous heart, spirit of life, calm the flutter of our breathing, for we are in a vulnerable place and find ourselves seeking the scent of the air, a community grown uncertain, as afraid of running as standing still. This is why we need you, Spirit of all creation. We need you to stand in our midst, to be seen in our midst as clearly as possible, our champion and our hope, not to face this struggle for us, but to remind us why we are facing it for ourselves. We need your strength, old one. We need your reassurance. Still now our nervous heart, calm our breathing, for we are resolved. We are neither running away nor standing still. Looking ahead to see what tomorrow brings. We are moving forward, knowing we are walking with angels, growing stronger with each minute that passes. Thank you all so much. And that is the end of this panel. Join us next time. And if you want to unmute yourself to say goodbye and say thank you to all of our panelists, please feel free to do so. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to all our panelists.